All right, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the How Are the Beers podcast. I'm Chris from How Are the Beers on Instagram, and I am joined, as always, by David and Alex from the Hop Guys on Instagram. Today, we are joined by Andy from the amazing Sour Wizards, Vault City. So, before we get cracking with this first beer, Andy, do you want to give yourself a bit of an introduction?
Yeah, so hey guys, I'm Andy. I'm the marketing manager for Vault City Brewing. I'm an Aquarius. I like long walks on the beach, and I'm really into sour beer. So I guess we're in good company today, which is good.
Awesome. So I suppose if we get cracking with this first beer, and then you can give us a bit of a history on how you got to where you are, and then
yeah, for sure,
you got to where they are. Because I know obviously I know you've came up through a couple of breweries, haven't you, to where you are now? So
yeah, definitely. I'll give you a little bit of my backstory as well as the full Vault City story.
Awesome. So do you want to introduce this first beer, and then we'll get.
Yeah, let's get stuck in. So we've got the three latest releases to try tonight. So the first one, we'll kind of drink them in order of intensity and booze as well, which is probably a good way to do it. We'll finish on a high. So this first one is the Mango Session Sour. So our Session Sour series is something we came up with almost a year ago, where we want to have a slightly different interaction, different experience with these beers. I mean, I'm sure you guys have tried a few of our beers in the past, but they come in, for those that don't know it that well, come in 375ml bottles, which is quite a chunk of change. And up at about 7% was our sort of average fare. We'll get into that a little bit later, but we wanted to really kind of hit something that's a bit more sessionable, a little bit more light and breezy. And the concept really came about for what we like to drink to keep refreshed through the summer. So the first two that we launched were a Cloudy Lemonade and a Ribena, take on Ribena and a take on Cloudy Lemonade, but down at about 4%, nice and bright, nice and zesty, really refreshing acidity, but then still packed full of flavor and well, packed full of fruit, like everybody knows and loves our beers. So this is the latest edition of that. So weighing in at 4.7, a little bit higher on the session scale than we're used to. But I think that really benefits the big juicy mangoes. We've sourced Alfonso mangoes for this beer, which makes it sound really fancy. They're basically much juicier, less fibrous mangoes. So you get a lot kind of richer, warmer flavor from the mango, and it blends in perfectly with our house mix culture, which already has a very tropical ester note on the base profile. And yeah, that sherbety acidity really makes it zing. This is a beer that I'm absolutely dying for right now.
That's awesome. I mean, the first thing that jumped out at me was, the smell of it is it's outrageous. But the main thing for me as well is for the percentage, the body of it's really, really nice as well. It's not really thin, it's
for sure.
Whereas it's still session. I mean, you could drink a lot of it.
This is something that rings through all of the beers we produce is this idea of balance. And being overly dry or overly sour or overly sweet isn't something that we look to do. There's always an element of balancing factors. So some of our beers are definitely on the sweeter scale, some are definitely more on the sour, some are definitely a little bit drier, but it's always about playing that together and having those elements reach a kind of harmony. So yeah, with the lower ABV beers, we definitely make sure that we keep a bit more residual body and keep it nice and full and rich, but then also with that nice tart acidity, making it really clean and refreshing. So yeah, no, I'm glad you picked up on that.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Alex, David, what are you thinking?
It's so nice. I get like a kind of like a half. One way I can kind of describe how it kind of tastes is it's half like a nice, crisp, white, sweet wine, but then it's just got an absolute juice bomb thrown right in the middle of it, and it just mangoes you out. It's absolutely class. Like it goes down an absolute treat.
That's brilliant. Yeah, the Session Sour series is something that we kind of wanted to go more down a grab a six-pack at the beach, or like grab a six-pack and have a picnic, as opposed to grab a bottle and have a sixth of it at the bottle share kind of vibe. So it's not so much about these kind of huge, crazy flavors, which we're about to get into, but more about that kind of easygoing, super delicious, just a fun beer.
It is. No, I would agree. Now, I think one thing with the session ones, which I've noticed, I think on the whole, they tend to be kind of like a singular. So like there's mango or there's
single
fruit or there's something like that. Whereas obviously when you get into the other ones, it starts being a lot more complex. If you
for sure.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. So that's I'll jump into that in a little bit, the kind of how we break our beers down, how the recipes come about and stuff like that. But that's spot on. We've kind of narrowed it down to single fruit for the session sour for the most part. There'll be a few kind of weirder and more wonderful stuff, and there has been in the past, but at the moment we're pretty happy going single fruit, showcasing that fruit to the best that we can, and letting that kind of incredible single variety flavor really come through.
Where did you find iron brew fruit? Where does that grow?
That grows on, I guess, tree in the lower Hebrides, you know.
Oh, okay, cool. Just wanted to know.
So what's a little bit about your journey to where you are at Vault City?
Yeah, absolutely. So my kind of beer journey started when I was 18. I got my first job, which happened to be in my local pub, my local bar, which was about a mile walk from my parents' house. And it was kind of like straight out of school, have a bit of pocket money, spend on the weekends, except I was working on the weekends. And it turned out to be this amazing place called the Anderson up in the Black Isle, where they have kind of 10-room hotel. They had like a white tablecloth dining room with amazing food from the owners, Jim and Anne, and did all the food. So the food was incredible. Then they had a whiskey bar, which was like kind of more informal dining, but then also with 350 single malt whiskies on the wall, which is actually where I really got started with flavor and with drinks, with single malt whiskey. By the time I left, I think I'd tried probably about 3/4 of the whiskies on the back bar. So I made my fair dent in that shelf. And then on the other side of the business was the public bar, so the pub. And they had sort of 3 rotating cask lines, really nice draft setup, and 200 Belgian bottles. So loads of Belgian bottles in the back bar. And that's kind of where I got my interest in beer and started going down this sort of rabbit hole that's got me to speaking to you on Zoom, which is mad. But this place just had this amazing beer selection. I mean, they had Anchor Liberty Ale on permanent tap. And this was 11 years ago. And they had it for a few years before that as well. Before craft beer was really a big thing in the UK, Jim was absolutely bossing it in buttfuck nowhere in Scotland, you know? So yeah, I started on kind of whiskies, got a bit interested in that. I was trying beers here and there, wasn't that fussed. I was more of a vodka Coke guy in my teens. But I tried a couple of beers that I was really, really enthused by. I mean, I remember trying Dirty Blonde and Punk IPA on cask, and Jim would drive to Brewdog and pick up casks of it and drive it back again to put on at the bar. So it was early days. But the beer that really kind of got me excited was actually a Boon Mariage Parfait. So I heard about these sour beers, and I was being told by my boss, Jim, that these were some of the best beers in the world. And I was like, okay, I mean, this is, you know, literally got a little badge on it that says best beer in the world. I'll give this a go. So tried this lambic beer, this goose, for the first time, and blew my tiny mind at the age of 18. I didn't like it, but I didn't not like it. I was just so intrigued. I didn't understand what it was about. I didn't understand how it came about. It put me down a real rabbit hole of learning about beer. So I picked up a Belgian beer book all about lambic, and I started learning about this kind of magic of spontaneous fermentation, and went down the rabbit hole of that. And I have to admit, it took me about a full year of every month buying a bottle of goose or lambic beer and still being like, what the fuck is this, you know? and really trying to wrap my head around what it was. And eventually it kind of clicked, and a bit of understanding the process and a bit of understanding how the flavor profile comes together. And yeah, then I was totally sold on the sour beer. So I then floated about on the Mediterranean a little bit. For the podcast viewers, I'm very ginger and not built to be in the Mediterranean. Definitely a Scandinavian heritage guy. So that didn't last too long. But I ended up getting a job in Bristol, at Brewdog Bristol. So I worked in the Brewdog Bristol bar, and then kind of had my American craft beer kind of influence and education, if you will. So when I was at the Anderson, I drank a lot of Belgian beers, then got into Brewdog, drank a lot of American beers. And off the back of there, I met the guys at the Wild Beer Co. So Andrew and Brett came in, did a couple of events with us, which I put on for them in the bar. And they put up a job post for social media and events guy. And I was like, hey, I kind of do social media and events. I could do that. That sounds like a job I could maybe wangle myself into, and sat down for an interview with them. And I think the next day they offered me the job, which was amazing. So I spent a couple of years predominantly running about chatting absolute nonsense about sour beer at festivals for the most part across the UK and Europe as well. I was really fortunate to be able to travel about and meet some amazing people through doing events and tastings, which was loads of fun, and learned a huge amount more about sour beer, which was the thing that I was really, really passionate about. Through those events, I bumped into a guy randomly called Rich Kilcullen, who, unbeknownst to me at the time, is of Wicked Weed fame. So kind of a big deal. And he had just moved over to Scotland to open up Brewdog Overworks. And then I again managed to wrangle myself a job with Rich up at Brewdog Overworks. So I made the move from the southwest to the northeast, about as tip to tip as you can possibly get in the country. I moved up to Aberdeen to move into the Brewdog Overworks facility. And it was a hell of a ride. I mean, when I first arrived, it was just a big empty shell. My first week was actually having the tanks arrive and hauling on a chain hoist to stand up these 150 hectolitre tanks. And I was the smallest person there at the time, so I was the one that was shoved into the containers to crawl into the back and liberate the tanks from the inside of shipping containers in like -2 degrees and sideways sleet. So I remember looking out the back of the van, and Rich is sat there in the forklift with like one half of him, he's got like this big beard, one half of him is full of snow, and the other half is just like dripping wet. I think I had the better job in hindsight. But yeah, so saw it go from almost a hole in the ground to a world-class sour beer facility. I mean, it was £4.5 million before they'd even brewed a beer. It was this incredible investment in this sour beer project. And I learned a huge amount in my 2.5 years at Wild Beer about brewing and blending and taste and flavor. But I think I learned more about beer in about a month and a half with Rich than I did in my time at Wild Beer. Not to say that they didn't know a lot, just this guy's next level. You know, he's been making beer for 15, 20 years and making world-class sour beer for most of that. So yeah, another incredible experience. Then I came on board with Vault City at the very beginning of last year. So I think I came on, in fact, February last year, so just over a year. And yeah, bumped into lockdown pretty quickly after I started. So that was a whole kind of big shebang. But yeah, so came in the door at Vault City just as they were going through a big kind of transition. I was actually the first employee in the door. So it's just two guys called Steve and Johnny that started the company at the time. So rewinding a little bit back to get to the start of Vault City, Johnny and Steve came together over a kind of mutual love of homebrewing in 2018 and started coming up with the idea of Vault City, where Steve was predominantly brewing New England IPAs and hazy pale ales and big juicy flavors, and Johnny was more into the mixed firm, kind of more my neck of the woods, Brettanomyces and barrels and getting funky and weird with the yeast cultures. And somewhere in the middle, they met, and we've now coined the idea of our beers as modern sour beers. That's the way that we like to talk about them. And I think it fits beautifully, this kind of almost new beer style, where you have this idea of mixed fermentation and mixed culture and all the flavors that can bring, but also with this big, opaque, ridiculous flavor profile that comes from this sort of new age of brewing, not necessarily any IPAs particularly, but that kind of influence from it, which has turned into this amazing beer that we're drinking just now. So they were brewing in Edinburgh, both from Edinburgh. They were brewing in Steve's kitchen, so it was like 400 litre batches on the stove, and yeah, fermenting in the basement. It was proper ghetto. I really wish I could have seen it and been involved in the 400 litre batches. I'm putting it out to as many people as would try it, and people received it really, really well. They were really excited by these big, bold, juicy flavors with acidity, but without the kind of the baggage of that traditional mindset and traditional flavor profile, where, you know, some sour beers can be like licking boot leather. And don't get me wrong, I love licking boot leather when it's in my sour beer, but this was something very different. And it's very accessible as well. I mean, I think you said that, I can't remember quite who it was, said it was smashable earlier on, or maybe I'm paraphrasing, but these beers are ridiculously drinkable, you know, whereas it's not a challenge to sit down and work your way through a small taster of these beers. My kind of big thing is always, you shouldn't have to have a degree in microbiology to be able to enjoy these beers. That's not what they're about at all. If you want to get geeky about yeast strains and fermentation, then we're your guys, you know, we'll talk all day long about our fermentation profile, but that's not the be all and end all. And if you want to sit down and say, hey, this tastes like mangoes and I like it, then that's like spot on for us. You know, we're more than happy if you're happy. And if you getting happy means nerding out, then that's cool too. We're down for that. So yeah, brewing in the kitchen, 400 litre batches. And they, in 2019, did a big push on festivals. Obviously not an awful lot of beer coming out the door. And so how do you get a small amount of beer to as many people as possible and try and get it in front of people? You go to beer festivals and you give it to them in person so that you can actually talk to them and interact with them, which went really, really well. They were all over the UK, all the beer festivals. I actually bumped into them several times when I was with Overworks. So met them at quite a few festivals in the UK. They were abroad at some really cool festivals as well, like Bruskaval over in Sweden and Art Beer Fest in Portugal. And the beers were just getting better and better. And people were really sitting up and paying attention to these beers because they weren't like anything else that was being put out at the time. I remember with my kind of barrel-aged sour beer Head On being a little bit blown away and kind of taken aback by, this is sour beer like I've never tried it before, you know, and I thought I was the sour beer guy. So it was great to see these kind of really big, crazy flavors coming through from mixed fermentation flavor profiles as well. Then at the tail end of 2019, they kind of made the big break / big leap of faith to really go all in. So Johnny and Steve both had full-time jobs at this point and for a little bit after this as well. But the opportunity arose at 71 Brewing up in Dundee to take a corner of their warehouse. And this is where I came into Vault City a little bit after this, was this kind of strange setup where it's not quite gypsy brewing, not quite contract brewing, and not quite cuckoo brewing, but somewhere in amongst all of that is where Vault City sat in 71. So we had all of our own stuff from cold side onwards. We would basically borrow the brew kit to brew our beers, then transfer across to our corner of the warehouse where we had our fermenters, all of our packaging, and then we'd store and sell the beer from there. So it was like this kind of in between all those spots. And it was a huge opportunity for us. So we went from 400 litre batches in the kitchen to 4,000 litre batches at a time on the fermenters. And that was on 2 FVs. So we had 2 fermenters at 40 hec, 4,000 litres that they were putting out. And then I think a week after I started, a second 2 fermenters, so doubling our fermentation capacity, arrived just in February last year. And that was when it was really starting to gear up and get going. We had a new bottling line on order, which I'll explain why that's so exciting in just a second. But then lockdown hit and shit got a bit weird, as it did for everybody, I'm sure. But that's probably a good time for me to stop talking, us to start opening beer.
I've just finished mine, so I'm gagging for another one.
Oh, perfect. I can tell. You had that glint in your eye, you know?
One eye's looking that way at the beer, one eye's straight forward on the camera.
So you lose eye contact, I know you need a beer.
Quick question, just before we jump on to the next bit. Sure. For any kind of, you're obviously hugely passionate about your sour beers, so for any kind of, do you have like a summary for sour beers which you'd give to a traditional ale drinker before they try one?
Oh, traditional ale drinker, yeah. Yeah. I guess my really cynical hat would be, this isn't a cask that's gone bad. Don't worry about it. I think there's a big thing with cask drinkers that sour beer is definitely a terrible thing, because a sour cask beer is absolutely fucking awful thing. Whereas the flavor profile is definitely something very different and very intentional, which is quite a difficult thing to do. I mean, I've worked with sour beer for 7 years now, something like that. And I put every single beer I produced in front of my dad, and he takes one sip of it and he goes, it's disgusting. that's the response every single time. And God bless him, he tries, he keeps having a go, but he's just not into it. And that's fine, you know. I think so. For flavor profile and the kind of description of it, I have this kind of of beer drinkers on a spectrum, right? There's your usual kind of route is that you start drinking beer when you're drinking lager, something like that, in the early days. You then maybe get introduced to an IPA, or alternatively a cask beer, which is this like whole new world of flavor and gets you really excited for what you could try in beer. Some people stop there, some people move on, and then you might try some Belgian beers, or you might try some stouts. You might have a big stout phase. And like I definitely did. You might even have a little segue into barley wine territory, which was a fun 6 months of my life that I don't remember. And then generally you end up going on to this super nerdy geekdom of sour beer, right? And that's kind of the pinnacle of the journey, is this sour beer territory, which is really difficult to understand. Like me when I was first getting into sour beer with my goose a month kind of trial that I put myself through. You end up having to really force yourself to appreciate these kind of flavors. However, we've also got this sort of other end of the spectrum, the off the scale spectrum, where you've got people who don't like beer actually really like sour beer. And most of beer, from lager all the way through to that barley wine phase that we have, is has some element of bitterness involved. And if you don't like bitterness, you're not going to go through all those steps to get there, to get to the end. Whereas if you like cider, if you like wine, these are things that have fruit flavor, that have acidity, that have dryness as well, if that's a barrel character and tannins. All the people who like these flavors instead actually all of a sudden are like, hey, this is a beer I like, and almost reverse into the beer world from the top end down. So from Vault City and also from my experience at Overworks and Wild Beer, there's this kind of amazing mixing point with sour beer, where you have the super nerds who are really into it and getting super geeky. And you've got people that are drinking this as the only beer that they like. And like, I've not liked beer before, but I really like this. So I've totally forgotten what I was talking about. I've gone on a massive tangent and forgot the question. So I apologize. I'm fessing up to it now. I've rambled enough. I can't hide it.
No, that's great, I think. And yeah, sorry for the other guys for making you wait longer to try this beer. Cause it's...
No, you're fine. You're fine.
You want to introduce this beer for?
For sure. So now we're going to crack into the Blackcurrant and lemon Verbena, which is a beer that I'm really excited about. So this is what we call our serious sour kind of range. This is in the middle, sort of 7 to 8%. Usually a combination of fruits, maybe some spice, maybe some herbs, maybe some different fruits on top of the fruits. Yeah, in our 375ml bottles. So getting a little bit more serious about this sour beer malarkey. Still loads of fun. This is a beer that I absolutely love. Not least because I came up with the idea of the combination, so I have a little bit of an invested bias going on here. But yeah, blackcurrants are a fruit that work really, really well for us in our mixed fermentation, in our mixed culture beer, because it has that tartness, has that sharpness. So when you have a sour beer and a sour fruit, it works really, really well together. The mango, the acidity is a little bit lower because mangoes aren't as acidic by character, so it has to fit. Like I was saying at the beginning, that balance has always got to be there. So the tartness from the berries really pulls through that acidity from the mixed culture. And you have this really vibrant, quite sharp acidity that's still got that sweetness from the blackcurrants. But then we added lemon verbena, which if you're not, I don't know, like a super chef, then you might not have heard of lemon verbena before. It's an awesome herb. So it's one of my favorite herbs to brew with. And it's kind of like somewhere between basil and lemongrass. The way that I describe it to people is it's like lemongrass if you get rid of the whole spicy character. Like forget about lemongrass being in curries and having any spice to do with it. It's like really lemony but herbaceous at the same time. So that's kind of the way that I would describe lemon verbena. And it adds this whole other dimension to the beer. It's got this amazing aroma of sort of sherbet lemon. And that sherbertiness that you guys might be able to taste is the lemon verbena coming really popping through. There's a little bit herbaceousness in the back note as well on the finish. Yeah, I think it's absolutely golden. I think it's a flavor combination that works really, really well.
I think it is. That is probably one of the best Vault City beers I've had, hands down. I think it's my favorite beer that we've made so far. But then again, I am slightly biased. The first words, and you've already said them, but the first words that came to my mind with that were tart and sharp, and obviously that is from the blackcurrants. There's no getting around that. But there's something. It must be the lemon verbena mixed with the blackcurrant, because that is. I think that's brilliant. Just brilliant. Really, really, really good beer.
I'll take that.
No, it is. I'm really, really enjoying that. That's nice.
Good.
It takes me back to just going on walks with like parents when I was younger, and just going to a bush, picking off a berry, and putting it straight in your mouth. It's super fresh. super tart off the bush, kind of.
Yeah,
that sounds really bad, but
no, it's perfect. I love a good forage. Blackcurrants are definitely on that super sharp side, and it's got almost that wild edge to it.
Mhm.
If you've ever tried any kind of wild raspberries or wild brambles or blackberries, as you'd call them south of the border, they've got that real kind of what I would describe as a malic acidity. It's a real bright, kind of intense sharpness to them. And blackcurrants definitely have that kind of direction. And like you said about eating a berry just straight off the bush, that lemon verbena definitely has that herbaceous note. So it does definitely have that idea of being out in nature and rummaging around in the foliage to get your little sour treat.
I've got a question about kind of like yeast cultures and stuff, and I don't know, get as nerdy as you kind of want with this.
Sure.
But my kind of journey with kind of sour beers, I've had them before, and I haven't really thought twice about the work and the kind of the knowledge that kind of goes into it. I'm guessing there's as many yeast cultures as there are hops and stuff, and it's all very quite complex. But can you break it down for someone who's very, very new into kind of sours? What does the yeast do, and how does it make it so different to any other beer?
Okay, no, that's a great question. I'm glad we cracked a beer first. So sorry, just to recap, your question is, how does the yeast affect the flavor of the sour beer?
Yes.
Is that kind of it? Cool.
Yeah.
So there's where to start. So there's lots of different ways of making sour beer. That's probably the best way to start this off as a massive caveat. So there's lots of different processes that end up with sour beer at the other end of it. But what it all comes down to is lactic acid bacteria, or LABs. So lactic acid bacteria is what gives you your acidity. So that's what gives you the sour flavor. Now you can have lactic acid bacteria in lots of different forms. So at the one end of the spectrum, you've got kettle soured beers, which is quite often put on cans or bottles, but quite often the descriptor is kettle soured. So that means that you basically, I'm sure you guys are pretty au fait with the brewing process, kind of standard operating brewing. And I'm assuming that most of your listeners are pretty okay with me using brewing terms, but you have your mash, you then transfer into your kettle, you basically wait for about a day at a certain temperature, about 40 degrees, and then the lactic acid bacteria, the lactobacillus, which is on the husks of the grains, actually sour the beer in the kettle. Then you would boil it, so you kill all that bacteria, but you still have the acidity in there. You transfer that into your fermenter, you pitch your regular ale yeast like you would for your other craft beers, and that ferments it like a normal beer. Add your hops, whatever you want to do. You've already got your sour base, and then you ferment it and you're done. So that's a kind of kettle soured beer. So there's not too much microbial activity happening in the fermentation. It's just in the kettle, and it's controlled, and you kill off the bacteria. What you don't want with sour beer is it to infect other beers. So kind of pretty hot topic, I guess, last year and at the moment is infection rates and contamination and that sort of stuff. But it's a huge thing with wild and sour cultures, is you don't want any of that getting into your regular beers, because then shit starts going wrong. If you control it and give it the right environment to taste good, it tastes good. But if you end up with it accidentally in your beer, it can taste bad. A bit like the cask sour beer that we were talking about a minute ago. That's never a good thing. Although we might put a sour beer in a cask at some point just for fun. But that'll be intentional, put it in a cask. So the next kind of move along would be a clean sour beer, as I like to kind of think of it, which fits into our modern sour beer category. So we brew a wort, we boil it, we move it into our fermenter, and then we co-pitch yeast and bacteria. So our yeast is a combination. So we've got house mixed culture is what we call it. Mixed culture is a blend of different yeasts and bacteria together. But the majority of our yeasts are called landrace. So Kveik, I don't know if you guys have heard of Kveik yeast.
Yep.
So it's basically like a Scandinavian Baltic yeast strain, which is farmhouse. So it was passed from farmer to farmer. It was moved around for generations. So it's a kind of semi-wild, semi-cultivated yeast strain. It's not quite fully wild, but it's not quite fully domesticated either. It's a little bit kind of under the radar. And then we also have lactobacillus. So we use lactobacillus bacteria strains that we pitch in at the same time. And then because of the yeast strain that we use is really tolerant, we ferment super hot. So we ferment like crazy high for regular yeast temperatures. Regular yeast would just like shit itself and crap out and make loads of terrible flavors at that temperature. But our house mix culture is used to that and likes it. And it also means that it's the right sort of temperature for our bacteria. So we have the fermentation of yeast eating sugars and making alcohol and carbon dioxide and flavor compounds at the same time that we have our bacteria making acid. So that's a kind of mixed culture in a nutshell. So that's where we sit, is there. And then you've got onto Brettanomyces. So Brettanomyces is a yeast strain, a wild yeast strain, that a lot of people think that Brettanomyces makes things sour. But Brettanomyces ferments things and is the lactic acid bacteria that actually makes them sour. So Brettanomyces is a wild yeast strain originally found from Britain. So Britain, myces, fungus, Brettanomyces. And it's found, everywhere. It's found on the skins of fruits. It's found it lives in the bark of trees. It ferments things. If we talk about spontaneous fermentation, it's Brettanomyces predominantly that's floating about and ends up in your beer. There'll be Saccharomyces in there as well, and there'll be loads of other bugs and bacteria. But Brettanomyces is the flavor compounds that the flavor contributor that we're really looking for from that style. So if you have a Brettanomyces mixed culture, that's a very different beast, and will be very aggressively attenuating. And it likes to be out in the wild, It's found on the fruits of skins. It doesn't like being in a massive cylindrical stainless steel tank. It gets freaked out really easily and produces lots of flavors that aren't desirable, if that's what you're looking for. And especially if you have it accidentally. So if you treat these wild yeasts like they're wild yeasts, they can produce beautiful flavors, these amazing aromas and characters in beers. But if you have an accidental infection in a beer, it's not meant to be in there, and it's probably under a lot of hydrostatic pressure from the beer. It's probably under a lot of CO2 capped pressure as well, and then also temperatures that it doesn't like to be at. So it'll start spewing out crazy flavors, and that's when things can start to, taste like horses and goats and boot leather again, which can be enjoyable in their own right, But generally speaking, if you have those flavors creeping into your IPA, then you've got some trouble.
Is it fair to say that making a sour beer is a lot harder than making a normal beer? Or I'm not saying normal, but like an IPA or something like that?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it certainly takes a different kind of knowledge. So it's just it would be like, a brewer trying to make wine. The process is not dissimilar, but there are nuances. There are things that you need to know to be able to do it right. Yeah. I'm a very amateur homebrewer with no badges to my belt, but I could probably go ahead and make a wine if I got stuck in. It would be pretty shit, but I could make it. That's the kind of the difference, I think. A lot of brewers who start making sour beer, either get lost in information because there's so much information about it, or take a small amount of information and start running with it and don't actually take in enough of what's going on. That's kind of my experience of it anyway, with people who've got stuck in. But yeah, I don't think it's harder. I just think it's very different.
Yeah, it's fair enough.
So sorry, then the very last step would be barrel aging. So typically you'd barrel age your Brettanomyces mixed fermentation sour beers, and you'd age them in barrels for however many months you want, 3, 6, 9, 12, 2 years, some people, which is way too long, but that's, personal preference, I guess. And that adds its own element to it. So you've got these kind of very varied ways of making sour beer. And the thing that frustrates me is that they're all capped into sour beer. You go onto any website that sells beer, I'll not name any names because I don't want to call anyone out, but they'll have a sour beer category, which is amazing that sour beer is its own category. And there's so many people making sour beer, they all go in there, but then they're all lumped in together. So you could be looking at, a couple quid for a can of a kettle sour beer next to, I don't know, say £35 for a 750ml bottle of barrel aged spontaneous beer. As a casual consumer, you go into sour beer and like, well, I'm not spending fucking 25 quid on a sour beer. What's that about? I'll buy this one. And they buy the potentially not as good. There are some beautiful kettle sours out there, don't get me wrong. I don't think it's a great process. I think it's inherently flawed myself. but there are some good ones. And you try a kettle sour beer, say it's not a very well done one, and you try that for the first time in sour beer and go, oh, I don't like sour beer, and you put it down and walk away. There's this whole other spectrum of how to produce it, these different flavor profiles that can come about through making sour beer that you're just never going to experience. And yeah, I'm rambling now. Let's move on.
I've got a follow-up question to the sours.
Go on.
So,
sorry, did that answer your question? Because I just
no, it did. Yeah. This year gone, so 2020, I think regarded by many as the year of the tipper. Is there going to be a year of the sour? Do you reckon you can see that happening in the next couple of years, or?
I reckon we can make that happen this year.
Yeah, this year.
There's it's always going to be a small corner of a small corner of a small market, you know. I think there's definitely more and more sours. From my point of view, last year was the year of the sour. I mean, Vault City put out a huge amount of sour beers. Loads of other breweries started putting out really good sour beers. Breweries I never thought would make sour beers started making sour beers. And yeah, there's the kind of the breadth across the UK really stepped up. And which is amazing to see that so many people are getting involved with it and giving it a go. Particularly from my point of view with Vault City, seeing the amount of people who in that sort of bracket of off the spectrum don't like beer, getting involved in sour beer through our beers, that's something that really excites me. I think that's awesome, is bringing people into trying new stuff and just have a go, you know. Like our electrician, he drinks Tennent's. He's drunk Tennent's since he was a boy, and he's not a boy anymore. And yeah, he's never drunk anything different. But he went away with a case of our beers and came back and he's like, "That's bloody delicious. I've never enjoyed a beer that's not Tennent's, but I really like it. Sign me up for a mixed case every fortnight, you know." Which is great. That's exactly what we want, is people to just have a go, not have any kind of pretension about it, and just enjoy some tasty flavors. And that's what I think sour beers have a real potential to do. So yeah, we'll do a sour beer year 1 year.
100%. So when we're talking there about, you know, different flavors and all that, and it's new for a lot of people, isn't it, when they try sours, and especially some of the stuff you guys come out with is stuff you would probably never think to put together, really. I had a question from on Instagram from Liam's Beer, and he's asking where do you get your inspirations from? How do you come up with your ideas for? So you're saying you came up with the blackcurrant and lemon verbena one. Where does this spring from? Where does your inspiration come from on the flavors that you guys put out?
It's a divine intervention, I think they call it. The flavors. Sorry, I'm stuttering away. So putting these kind of ideas together for flavors of beer can come from anywhere. So anyone at Vault City is more than welcome to pipe up with an idea. And if it gets a nod, it gets a nod. So the kind of process is very fluid. Me and Steve have sat down on several occasions and repped out a bunch of beer ideas. But the inspiration can come from just about anywhere. We've got several beers that have been based on cocktails. So we actually went through a little bit of a cocktail phase at the tail end of summer last year. We got a bit stuck into it and really excited about the idea of recreating cocktails and sour beers. We've also done some soft drinks, most notably our Iron Brew Sour, which is banging. And then we also look at things like baked goods. So we've got our Plum Bakewell just come out a couple of weeks ago. We did a sweet cherry last year, Bakewell Sour. The next beer we're going to do is based on baking as well. But basically anywhere that there are flavor combinations that are out there, we're not beholden to just looking at beer and what people do with beer and going, oh, cherry sour beer, a creek, that's something we should do. Like, that's not particularly what we're interested in. We want to find out where we can make really kind of transcendent flavor combinations happen. I'm a big fan of flavors that come together and are greater than other parts. And that's something that's really exciting when you have that magical moment where a couple of disparate things come together and all of a sudden you're like, boom, this is it. This is perfect. So yeah, it basically just comes from discussion over flavor and experimentation with flavor and trying lots of tasty stuff, you know.
Have you thought about doing a book fast Sour. I mean, Bucky Sour would be the one. Like,
I actually tried to do a Buckfast collaboration when I was at Overworks, and the monk shot me down, unfortunately.
Oh no way!
I even went to the. I'll show you guys once we've finished recording, but I've got a picture of us at Buckfast Abbey.
Class.
Would you ever you ever thought about taking ideas from, I'm going to say me. I dropped you a message, Andy, didn't I? And I said about, for example, like a refresher bar. That's my favourite.
Yeah.
Would you ever think about something like that? Or I've got a number of ones here from followers when I put the post.
Oh, go on then. Read out a couple of suggestions.
I'm going to find them out. So Wu-Tang Cans says sweet-based ones like drumstick, blackjack, or wamba.
Yeah, drumstick has been asked for a few times. We put drumsticks out a lot. I think that would be awesome.
It would be. And then I'm obviously going with the refresher bar. Then we've got the Beer Broker, Perfect Pint, and Craft Beer Redhead all said French Fancy.
French Fancy. I brought that up the other day. It was a French Fancy sour beer. Yeah, I think it would be awful in a sour beer, to be perfectly honest. It's really difficult. These flavors that you want to imagine drinking.
The work. Yeah.
If you think about a French Fancy, it's mostly cream. you just have to put cream and sugar into your beer, and that's we did coconut cream. It wasn't great. I mean, it was delicious, but it turned out a little bit.
There's two more, one of which from IPA Adventures says raspberry and guava sour.
Oh, raspberry and guava. Hello.
He says he thinks that's like an ultimate combo going on there. And then the Drunken Duck drinks, which I think this would be hilarious because it would turn people's heads inside out, would be a nuclear waste sour. So them really, really, really sour sweets.
Yeah.
Not for the faint-hearted, that one. Like.
Yeah, that would be pretty extreme. I think
it would be. That might turn people's faces inside out. That would be a good one to give to someone who never tried a sour beer.
Yeah. Here you go. Have fun.
So,
there's some people actually ring in with really good suggestions. We've got one coming up in a couple months. That was a suggestion from one of our pals out and about in the industry. I'm not giving anything away because it's pretty special, but like I said, inspiration can come from all over. It can come from food, from wine, from cider, from anywhere that you've got tasty flavors. We're interested. Like if it tastes good, we're there. And recreating stuff we think is really fun and really silly. So doing stuff like our cheeky Vimto that we did at the tail end of last year, like that for us was just hilarious and actually worked really, really nicely in a sour beer. Some of the ideas that we have probably wouldn't work very well in a sour beer, and so they go to the bottom of the pile or they get burned.
Have you got, and obviously I don't want you to give anything away, Andy, because I almost like the waiting to see what you're bringing out every couple of weeks.
Yeah, the anticipation makes it.
Yeah. So have you genuinely got like a list of stuff you're going to do over the next, say, I don't know, 6 months or whatever, and it's just deciding which ones you want to do every couple of weeks? Is that how it works?
So we've got our kind of our beer launch list, if you like, planned out usually a couple months ahead. We don't tend to go too much further than that because we know that we'll probably change our minds, and stuff will change. Some things we won't be able to get the ingredients for, so they'll have to drop off the list. So we've got to change it up a little bit. It becomes a bit of a mess if you start trying to do like 6 months or a year at a time. It'll never go to plan. So there's not much point in trying. But yeah, we definitely go, I think, about 3 months out for our beer release schedule.
Nice. There was one question and it's just popped into my head and and it's kind of a little bit off topic.
That's okay. I like off topic. So I'm good at that.
Same as, especially with you guys, but same as with many breweries, a lot of beers that you guys bring out are kind of one-offs. Mm-hmm. And won't necessarily get rebrewed.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you? And I'm asking this on quite a selfish basis because there was one beer that I missed out on, and I've heard such great reviews about it, and I'm desperate to try it, and I haven't yet. Which was the Pear and Vanilla Sour, just for the record.
Nice. I'm afraid I don't even have a bottle of left. I can't even post you one personally, I'm afraid.
It was actually what I was on a walk with my pal, a socially distant walk with my pal the other week. He kind of mentioned this. Have you ever thought about maybe running like poll or something on Instagram of your previous, kind of like a knockout round thing of your previous sours, and rebrewing the one winner just once every 3 to 6 months, just as like an additional release on that week or something, just in case people really wanted to get their hands on, like, for example, I know that Iron Brew sour is fantastic.
I'm glad you like it.
I've got another bottle in the house, and I can't wait to try it again. But I know some people obviously might not get a hold of it. You know what I mean? And have you ever thought about that? Or it's not something you guys would do.
So we've actually started bringing back rebrews. This is Vault City. We should really go back to the whole Vault City story. I've just been garbling on about sour beer like I usually do. So the Christ, I've just rambled and then forgotten what we were talking about. Right, rebrewing. So yeah, the brewery's only 2.5 years old. There's not been enough kind of time to really establish what beers are going to come back again and again. There's still too many flavors to have a go of and see what kind of happens. So we've got to the point now where we're actually starting to rebrew recipes that we really like, but also obviously that people are really excited by. So Iron Brew Sour is our first ever annual release. Last year we released it accidentally for Burns Night, which worked out pretty perfectly, and people went bananas for it. And we thought it's hilarious and think it's delicious, so we rebrewed it again this year. The kind of main exception for that is the Skies series. So we brewed Strawberry Skies, which was one of the first beers that really made people sit up and take notice of Vault City. It's a big big kind of flag that we've stuck in the ground with the Sky series. Then went on to do raspberry and cherry, and we've come back around to strawberry just before Christmas. So that's something that we're doing continuously, that we'll keep brewing new iterations of that Sky series. Same with the Bakewell. We've settled on this recipe for Bakewell that we're really happy with, and so the dark fruits then got followed by sweet cherry, and then got followed by, sorry, there's a kettle going, so I'm going to move the audio out of here as it's recording.
It's all right.
So, so this idea of getting to the point where we really like the beers, we know that people really like them and are looking forward to them, and releasing them once a year, that's something that's about to start kicking back off again. So we are, I don't think this is too secret to say, but we're about to launch the Peach and Nectarine Sour for the second time. So Peach and Nectarine was a beer that we came up with at the very beginning of lockdown. It was one of our original lockdown beers, and that's coming back around again just about a year on. So really, really excited to put that back out and see what people think of it the second go round. And yeah, you'll see a few of them dot through this year that we rebrew stuff from last year. We're kind of big fans of taking things that we've done and adapting them. So like the next beer that we're about to try, which we'll get onto in a sec, but also like the Plum Bakewell series and like the Sky series, we've taken something that people really liked, and then we've changed it up a little bit and moved the iteration on to kind of step 2, or the SIPA series. We did SIPA V1, SIPA V2, SIPA V3, and it's definitely within a theme, but changing as we go. That's part of the way that we like to go. It's just raw experimentation. But also we're now at the point where we've done quite a lot of recipes. I think we launched 60 beers last year, which is pretty bonkers through lockdown. We've launched 60 beers, and of those, the ones that we're really stoked about will come back this year. So pear and vanilla is a hot topic for a rebrew. That's, people went absolutely bananas for that beer, which I'm really, really pleased about. It was absolutely delicious. And that will probably make a reappearance, but I can't confirm or deny that at this point.
Oh, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Should we get into this last one then? Now we're on the topic of when you said we'll crack into this one.
Yeah. I'll if we crack this beer, and then I'll dive back into the Vault City story, and we'll get caught up to speed on that, and then do some questions, I guess.
Of course.
So we've got the Rhubarb Maple Pecan. So this leads, actually, a very good leading question there, Chris. So I enjoyed that. So talking about rebrewing beers and bring them on as evolutions, the Apple Maple Pecan, which came out at the same time as the Pear and Vanilla, was one of our kind of most popular beers of last year. So the apple maple pecan went bananas, and this is the next iteration of the maple pecan kind of series. So we've gone with rhubarb this time around, and keeping that idea of a kind of fresh fruit with the acidity, then the maple and pecan supporting that with a almost like a crumble or like a pie, and the almond nuts just dusting off the top. Sorry, pecan nuts just dusting off the top. So you've got tart, refreshing fruit. You've then got sweet, rich maple, and then you've got this lovely earthy pecan nut kind of back note to it as well.
You say it tasted like a pie, like straight up, like rhubarb pie.
Tastes just like a pie.
First thing I noticed cracking that bottle, the smells coming out of this it's insane.
Yeah.
They're so strong, but in a good way, obviously. And it does just hit all those flavours that you mentioned there, to the point of you get the pecan nuts, but as though they're a dusting on top of the rhubarb crumble kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That tastes awesome, man. That's
It's amazing how that transitions through the whole thing, because the first bit I get, there's a place that Chris and Alex will know about. It's a place called Beamish. It's like an old history museum, and they do rhubarb and custard sweets. The rhubarb is that rhubarb from there, and it's unreal. But then you do get that richness that would be the maple syrup come through, and at the end, that nutty, groundy kind of flavour is really, really nice, and it's an all-in-one. Personally, I would think this would be probably the best kind of autumn beer. I think we've had two quite summery beers, but this is like the transition, like this is late September, October time, and it would, oh my god, it would be the best beer for that time of year, like, wouldn't it?
The apple maple pecan came in at autumn time. I think it was October that the apple maple pecan came out, very much as a seasonal release. We kind of got into that seasonal vibe with the blueberry pumpkin spice latte and and the apple maple pecan last year. But rhubarb is just about to go into season, or has just come into season, I think. So for us, it was like the perfect way to bring back maple pecan, but for a spring type vibe, kind of just coming out of winter, a little bit fresher, a little bit more lively. But yeah, the maple pecan definitely was born out of the autumn months.
Moving on to a question that kind of links that. I know it's not Vault City, but we'll get back into Vault City. I had a question from our follower, Magpie Hodgson. He said, what's going to be the go-to summer beer for 2021? Now, you can name a Vault City or a previous Vault City, and I'd also like you to try and jump onto someone else, or if you can give a shout out to another kind of local brewery to where you are, that would be quite cool as well.
Gosh, local to me, I've been really enjoying the stuff that New Barns have put out. New Barns are a new brewery in Edinburgh. Their table beer for me was killer last year, so I'm expecting to crush tons of that this summer. For Vault City through the summer, I think honestly our session sour range throughout the whole summer is going to be great once the pubs open back up again, and you can get, a 2/3 of raspberry session sour sat down in a beer garden. I think that's going to be my sweet. That's going to be my happy place. Nice. And who else has been knocking out the park? What have I been enjoying recently? I've been picking up quite a few bottles from my pals down at Yonder in Somerset. So they're a sour beer brewery, predominantly sour beer brewery. They've got some clean stuff on the go as well, which is tasty nice. But their big focus is on foraging. So I wasn't lying when I said I enjoy a good forage. But, they would be putting out some really, really cool stuff. So Yonder, well worth checking out through the summer. They do obviously foraging's a little bit more easy to do in the summer months rather than the winter months when everything's dead. But they do some great floral additions. So I think they've done magnolia and they've done elderflower. They've done a few others I forget the names of, but they've been really, really good. Their saisons with forage flowers have been cool. So I'm excited to drink some of that, some of the New Barns table beer, and obviously loads of our session sours through the summer.
I think your session sours definitely are. It's a funny one because we're sitting and we're really, really enjoying them, and it's the start of March. But I can imagine in the beam and sunshine.
Yeah, that's where it's at.
Just wouldn't touch the sides. When you're talking about Yonder, there, I've only tried one beer from Yonder, and I do need to try more. But I tried their raspberry goes, which was
banging.
Colour on it and the glass was outrageous, but it was I really enjoyed that. It was really nice.
Well recommended.
Definitely. But this is it's funny when you talk about seasons and stuff, because this one we're drinking now is like not necessarily for autumn or anything, but for kind of the colder months. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's it. It's definitely a colder month vibe with the maple pecan, but because it's kind of, we're coming out of that a little bit, it's a little bit more hopeful. That tartar rhubarb rather than the fresh apple, I think, is just what people need right now. Is a little bit of livening up.
And you cannot taste the percentage whatsoever. And
we're a bit notorious for that.
Honestly, I've got a really, really funny question from Wu-Tang Cans as well, and I'll ask it now, but I think it stands for this as well. But they've said, and they've used your marshmallow sour for the question, because that was obviously 11.5%, which was tremendous as well, mine. But they've said, how many years I'll start again. How many years at Hogwarts did it take to make 11.5% marshmallow sour taste as potent as a J2O?
I mean, again, for the podcast listeners, I'm very ginger. I get the Ron Weasley joke an awful lot, so I can give you assurance that it was in the OWL exams. Yeah, definitely. Fifth year.
Have you ever thought? And after this question, obviously, I know you were going to talk a little bit more about Vault City, and you can obviously.
I'll get that story, dude.
But have you ever thought about doing? And again, this is another question from somebody else. Have you ever thought about doing a collaboration with somebody, or have you already? And I might have missed it or whatever. But have you ever thought about doing that?
Yeah. I mean, collaborations are super high on our list of priorities. It's just that we're not allowed to travel outside of our county lines. Never mind out the country. Never mind to another brewery at the moment. It's been a real kicker. We were stoked to do some big collaborations last year, and they all got put on permanent pause, unfortunately. For me and for Vault City as well, there's our kind of idea, certainly my idea of collaborations, is to bring something to the table that wouldn't exist without the two breweries, is to have a true sense of collaboration where you have both parties inputting. I am a little bit disparaging of seeing breweries collaborating, and it's like the brewer turns up in the brewery, takes a photo, and then goes home. And the beer could have happened without them, that didn't need to be a collaboration. That was just two breweries hanging out. Let's just call it what it is and go and play pool and drink beer. Like, if you want to hang out, let's go hang out. That's cool. But actually bringing something to the table that benefits the beer, I think is something that is something that we'll focus on with our collaborations. So bringing on producers like cider producers and being able to have their fresh press come in and their scratched apples coming into our sour beer, that's something that's really exciting. We wouldn't be able to do that beer without them. That's something that's a kind of true collaboration. One that I worked on at Overworks was Siren's barrel project. So me and Rich flew down to Siren, tasted through their barrel program. We picked the barrels that we liked out of their program. Then Steve flew up to us. He tasted through our barrel program. He picked the barrels that he liked from our stuff. And then we blended them together. So you literally couldn't have that beer without the two physical barrel programs existing separately, which blew my mind in terms of a kind of collaborative aspect. But that idea that actually collaborating on something and making it worthwhile and making it really interesting is definitely something that we'll focus on. So whether it would be, collaborating with someone like Verdant or Dea, and doing crazy hop profiles that they work with all the time with our mixed culture, that's really cool. That's got a whole element to it that ties them both together. Or like I said, with a cider producer and bringing their apples in, that's a whole kind of cohesive element to it, as opposed to just kind of turning up on brew day, maybe stirring the mash pad a little bit and then getting pissed with your pals. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm more than up for doing as soon as I'm able to move out of the house, never mind out of the country. But let's just call it what it is,
I think being sourheads, you've got a real good kind of platform to go out there on. I think sour's definitely more experimental. I think you can be way more experimentative with stuff, and I think it would pay off in leaps and bounds, rather than say if someone who is known for super hoppy profiles have got their taste. It's hard to unwind that, whereas you guys, you've got nothing to unwind. The world is your oyster with all the kind of flavors and different things you can do.
A little bit, yeah. We've definitely set the precedent that no flavors are off limits. So we'll go wherever a fun idea takes us, you know.
Definitely. Go on then, Andy. I'll let you finish your Vault City story, and then we'll hit up a couple more questions, and then.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, yeah. No, I've missed it. It's too late. I was going to say that the Rhubarb Maple Pecan finishes the set. So we've got our modern sour beer family, is the way we like to call it. So not tied to kind of tradition or traditional practices or any of that sort of thing. Very much inspired by historical and traditional beers, but not beholden to them in any way. Then within that, we've got our Session Sour series, which is our 4%, easygoing, refreshing, really bright and vibrant, sort of mostly single fruit beers. Then we have our Serious Sours, as we call them, which are the 7%, super fruited, usually a combination. And the last one on the other end is our Silly Sours. So if the idea is not silly enough, this probably would have been good to talk about when I was talking about recipe ideas. But if it's not silly enough, it doesn't go in the silly sour pile. It gets discarded. It's not big enough. It's not weird enough. It's not mad enough. If it doesn't kind of make us outright laugh or go, can we do that? Then it's not in that category, and we want to make it that level of interesting and out there. So yeah, pushing those kind of flavor boundaries of what we can manage in beer is definitely well up there. There's the kind of segregation, or sorry, the separation of these modern sour beers into those three categories came about when we came up with the Session Sours. We wanted them to be a very different experience. We wanted them to be quite different. And then we eventually started realizing that we were brewing beers that were sort of 10%. They were super out there and weird and wild, like the strawberry woo-woo. And they weren't our normal state of affairs. So these are pretty silly. We'll call these our Silly Sours. And then what we're left with in the middle, we called in-house our normal sours. Bearing in mind that our normal sours were 7 to 8%, 300 grams per liter of crazy fruit beer, usually being based on some kind of baked good. Didn't quite fit the description, so Serious Sour came out instead, which is really fun to say with my Scottish accent and a slight lisp. So I apologise for this. Let's put a pin in that and jump back into the Vault City story. So I think I got up to lockdown, to me just arriving at the beginning of lockdown with Johnny and Steve.
Yeah.
And this is at 71 Brewing in Dundee. So we did what everybody had to do, jumped online and created a web shop, lickety split, and started going with web sales. So that was the kind of first job for me coming in the door, was put this website together. And we had a huge surplus of kegs. Obviously, we were planning to hit the festival circuit really hard in 2020, like we did in 2019. And had all this beer that we'd saved up for festivals we now couldn't use. So luckily at the time, and unfortunately, we were bottling everything by hand, and were able to hook up a couple of kegs to our bottler and actually bottle out these kegs, which are obviously perfectly great beer, just not able to get it to anyone. All of a sudden we could put it into bottles and get it back out. So we were launching a beer, I think at the time it was every week, for what we called Sour Sunday, which is a segment that we still run in today. We've refined it an awful lot and made it a lot slicker. That was the origins of that, was these festival kegs that we couldn't get rid of and had to launch. We also had 4 full fermenters with no real way of packing them and knowing where it was going to go. So we were packing sort of to order. We would see what the orders were looking like for that week on the online shop, and then we would package out of tank what we needed. That's the perfect spot for it, is to just sit in the fermenter. Nothing's going to go wrong with it in the fermenter once it's a finished product. So yeah, pulling crazy packaging shifts. Our bottling line was a manual filler, 4-head manual filler. So if anyone's ever been to like a petrol garage late at night and you're trying to buy a loaf of bread and, I don't know, a Twix, and you've got to do the like with the drawer, the slidey thing to pass the money and get the goods back so you don't steal anything. It's a little bit like that. You've got to open the thing, put the bottle in, put the lever in, wait a bit, put the lever out, open the thing, take the bottle out, and then manually capping each one individually, and then manually labeling each one in a little label spooler. It was ridiculous. There's me and Steve topped and tailed a 24-hour bottling shift that went from, I think, 5 a.m. till 5 a.m. or something like that. It was absolutely stupid to get enough beer packed of just one beer for the rest of that week. So it was a bit mad. Then at the kind of precipice of the online shop, we launched the Imperial Stouts. So we did some double mash impy stouts, and it went bananas, absolutely bananas, to the point where it crashed the website just about, and it certainly crashed me. And we just couldn't keep up with the orders, with a few breakages going on, resends, with communications, with making it all happen and keeping it all going. It all just kind of fell apart. So we did the only thing we could do, which was pull the plug. And we're just like, can't sustain this, we're just going to start again. So we took a few weeks to kind of circle the wagons and get some new beers on the go, and then fire out a new edition of the online shop. So that was a good point. About this sort of time, Johnny actually left Vault City. So Steve and Johnny, being the co-founders, they separated ways, creative differences, as they say. He's gone on to open up Holy Goat Brewing, which he just announced in October last year. So he kind of took the summer to get his plans right and get stuff going. And yeah, we're really, really stoked to try his beers once he's ready, I think in a month or two.
I've pre-ordered the launch box.
Yeah, bro. There's I'm holding out hope that he'll just send me one anyway. So yeah, he's off to do that thing. So then it was just me and Steve for a big stretch through the summer, but managed to really hit our stride with the beers coming through, with demand picking up, kind of lockdown easing a little bit through the summer as well. And again, we got in over our heads just a little bit. So at the height of it, I think it was October, we launched 9 beers in 1 month, and the month before was 8 beers. So it was churning through the sour beers, and they were absolutely flying out. But we were kind of running, you know, when you run downhill when you're a kid and you can't quite get your feet out in front of you, and you're not sure when, but you know you're shit at some point. It felt a little bit like that. We were properly going for it at pace. And again, we did the only thing we could. We just took a step back, took a quiet moment to ourselves, and readdressed the situation. That's when we started kind of assembling the team that we've got now, which is, I think it's an absolute superstar team. So we brought in a guy called Andy Wilkie, who's our operations manager. I don't think Steve will mind me saying, me and Steve are both fairly unorganized people. And Andy is possibly the most organized man I've ever met in my life. So he was the perfect person to come in and make sure that everything was, you know, on course with Vault City. And then we have Haig, who's an absolute superstar. He's done absolutely every job under the roof of the brewery from you know, start to finish. He's been involved in just about everything. We call him our chief positivity officer, because that guy is never beat down by any situation. And then just the start of this year, we brought on Ravi, who I actually worked with at Overworks, and he's come on as our brewer, our lead brewer. So he's the fermentation wizard. And that's us. We just brought on Joe as well last week. So he's a brand new addition to the team. So we'll get onto that. But through last year, the plan was always to move back to Edinburgh. So being up at 71 Brewing was a huge leg up, a huge jump for us. But we were always aiming to get back to Edinburgh, to where the brewery started, and open our own brewery. There's using someone else's brew kit is incredibly beneficial for not having to buy your own brew kit. But using someone else's brew kit means that you're beholden to their brew schedule, which is less than ideal. And yeah, so the aim was always getting back this way. The commute's a little bit nicer as well, living and working in Edinburgh as opposed to working Dundee, which is about an 1.5-hour drive, something like that. And yeah, we had such a huge support from our community through last year and through the lockdown, in between episodes of Tiger King, that we managed to actually put down and move, you know. So we've now gone from I think about a 25 square meter space with our fermenters, our packaging line, our racking, our office, which was a fold-out table next to a drain, to a 5,000 square foot warehouse in Portobello that's an empty platform to build on. And our brew kit arrived just before Christmas, so we got it commissioned over Christmas and New Year. That kind of dead week between the two, we were in brewing our first batches on the new brew kit, which is 40 hex, 4,000 litres. So we're not making a huge jump up in terms of volume. In fact, it's exactly the amount of volume. We moved our fermenters down, got one extra fermenter, but it's more about making production smoother and easier to manage and handle, as opposed to trying to bump up the volume. We're quite happy not taking over the world. We just want to make super fun beer and have a fun time doing it at the same time. So yeah, we're now like fully up and running. We've hit our stride. We actually said earlier this week, we had a team meeting and all of us kind of said, yep, okay, business as usual. We'll just do more of the same and everything's good, I guess. Cool. Like what? Where's the fire to put out? Where's the danger? Where's the the explosion happening? But we've now really hit our stride with the beers that we're making in Portobello. We've only had to throw away one batch, I think, which is brill. And the house mix culture made it down really successfully. No hiccups there with transporting that down. I mean, I think the beers have been tasting better and better. Having control of our hot side, our brew kit has been hugely beneficial. And we're kind of excited for what's coming next. The big next step for us is getting to know our kind of community. And Portobello, obviously, it's pretty difficult when you can't meet up with anyone inside or outside. But the plan is to put in a tap room in Portobello. That was one of the big draws to that site. For listeners, I should say, I keep saying Portobello like you know where I'm talking about. But Portobello is basically a beach town next to Edinburgh, which has been swallowed by Edinburgh. I kind of describe it as the Brighton to London is Portobello to Edinburgh, except you can get there in a 15-minute bus ride. So it's super close. And the beachfront's beautiful though, white sandy beach all along the Firth coast. And the brewery is, I mean, a pretty Herculean, but I reckon if someone with a decent arm was standing on the roof of the brewery, they could hit the sea with a rock. You know, it's I mean, that's maybe an exaggeration. It's about 10 minutes. It's not fun. And it's it's a really, really cool part of town. So really excited to be in Portobello. And hopefully we'll have a tap room before long, and hopefully that'll coincide with people being able to actually visit our tap room. That would be nice.
We'll definitely be there.
Yeah, I will be there.
I'll pull up a couple stools for you guys. I'll set out the reserve sign.
If not, yeah, exactly. I mean, I these two guys will agree as well. And I mean, it obviously coincides with you moving back to Edinburgh, and like you say, having control of your own, shit now. And I don't think you can mention sour beer in the I'm going to say the craft beer world. You know, being a bit of a pretentious arsehole, but in the craft beer world, you can't mention sour beer and not mention Vault City in the same conversation. I feel there's loads of breweries that might venture out and do a sour beer, or there's breweries that do excellent sour beers, but I think there's no questioning how much kind of hype you guys have in the sour beer world. And
yeah, people are super excited about our beers, which is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a good thing for you guys that you live up to the hype, because
it wouldn't last very long if we didn't.
Exactly, but I know, for example, like I'm on every, well, I'm on every second Sunday purchasing the Vault within the first 5 minutes of them being online, and it's.
Bless your heart for it.
I think Vault City are just the brilliant. You guys are a bit different to everybody else, and I know you did a couple of stouts, but you guys concentrate mainly on sour beer. Yeah, for sure. And I just think, to an extent, a bit of a breath of fresh air into the craft beer scene that there's not. You do concentrate solely on sour, if that makes sense, and you don't try and venture out into other styles, and that makes sense.
It's one of those things that we've found this kind of unique sweet spot of modern sour beer that we've found a real knack for making these mad flavors work in these incredibly balanced beers for how crazy they are, and people absolutely love it. We love making them, we love drinking them. And there's something to be said about narrowing down your focus and really nailing something. I've got a lot of time for breweries that pick a thing to be shit hot at and are shit hot at it. I also love breweries that make loads of different styles. Don't get me wrong. I love being able to try, 4 or 5 different styles while I'm sat in one tap room or from one brew and see the variance between them. But hunkering down and having our focus is definitely definitely the one. Like I said earlier about people who really like beer, like sour beer, and people that not necessarily like beer at all, like sour beer. That's the kind of the magic point for us, is introducing these people to beer who go, wow, I've never tried anything like that before in my life. Like I did when I first tried my first ever sour beer. I was like, whoa, what is this? Except being able to have those accessible flavors, those bold fruit flavors, to get people excited about it at the same time. And yeah, I think the beers we've been putting out, people have been really excited by, and making a lot of noise about what we're doing, which is brilliant. Like, we wouldn't be where we are today in Portobello with our brand new brewery if people weren't as excited about our beers as getting involved every second Sunday with the Sour Sunday launches when we put out some new beers, and loving it, you know, which is one of the best things ever, is to see people online talking about our beer and how much they enjoy it, and the weird tasting notes I get, and the nostalgia pieces that people have, these little moments in time. That's something that's really magical, is when we make something that somebody tastes and they have an instant kind of memory of attachment to it, is pretty special, to be perfectly honest.
Was that what David was saying about the blackcurrant and lemon verbena? Wasn't it, when you were talking about, you know, picking berries?
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
I think with in terms of us three, I think we've had different experiences with Vault City. I think, Chris, you drink quite a lot of it, and you've pretty much had most of the portfolio. Alex had a couple before. Personally, before now, I've had none. I've never touched one, which I feel really bad about. But having these now is actually, honestly, I've seen them in the shops and I've been like, I don't know. I think I'll just go back to the IPA. I will be totally
brill. That's exactly what I
now. I think that the depth and flavour is just superb. I don't think I've known anything else like it. And I'm a fan of sour beer, and I'll have everything now and again. But these are a different kettle of fish. And if whoever's listening has never had sour beers before, only start with the best, I would say. these are really, really good.
To be fair, I think just going on what I guess brought me to Vault City was just some of the weird combinations, like you say, your city sours. Surely that's not going to work in a beer, and just seeing that on the shelf, and it's like you've almost got to pick it up and try it. And I think it was the was it the pumpkin spice latte one you mentioned earlier?
That's one
over Christmas, which I tried, and it blew my mind. It's like got to try so many more of these, and it's it does generally just blow your mind. You think that's not going to work, and it generally does.
Yeah, we've pulled a few of those out the bag. There's a couple of flavor combinations that sound absolutely bonkers, but come out beautiful. And that's the focus always comes back to balanced flavor and counterpointing and contrasting certain elements while maintaining that kind of intensity match as well. And it's an exciting world of flavor that awaits you if you've not tried some Vault City beers before.
Definitely. Andy, it's been, has anyone got any other questions you want to ask? No,
I think that's a good spot to leave it. It's been really interesting. Thank you very much.
Andy, you've been
no problem at
all. Mate. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then we'll have a little catch up after. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much, man.
Everyone for listening, as always.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on. It's been an absolute blast, and drinking a couple of beers with you guys has been great. Thanks for listening to me ramble on.
It's been great.
Right.